which a lack of opportunity and capability leads to low income or deficiency of economic needs. In the United States today, we use an absolute threshold measure of poverty, called the Official Poverty Measure, or OPM, created in 1963 by Molly Orshansky. While the OPM worked in the 1960s, through research we have found that our system is out of date. Therefore, we believe that the best way to measure poverty is through the Human Development Index, because we feel this better examines the roots of poverty and the relationship between lack of opportunity and low functionings. Currently, poverty is measured by the OPM. Using the OPM, around 50 million people in the U.S., about 14.5% of the population, are currently living in poverty. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, someone is below the poverty line if their income is below 3 times the cost of a minimum food diet in 1963. Income is measured by a person's gross annual pre-tax income. Cash benefits like TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, and workmen's compensation are included in this measurement. Measuring poverty in this way is simple, because a person's before-tax income is easy to calculate. We call this fallacy of measurement. We'll talk about that later. Unfortunately, this measure is no longer appropriate for today's needs. On average today, families spend around 1/6 of their income on food, compared to 1/3 in 1963. This means that, even if they are above the poverty line on paper, they still could be living in poverty, and not receiving benefits from the government that they need. The OPM does not subtract non-discretionary expenses, so near cash and in-kind benefits like SNAP, food stamps, government housing, and EITC, earned income tax credits, are not included. Nor are rising standards of living or expenses of job transportation, medical costs, or geographic differences. Let's take a look at a family. According to the 2015 Poverty Guidelines for the 48 contiguous states and the District of Columbia, a family of 5 will be under the poverty line if their income is less than $28,410 a year. The mother of this family, who is the sole income provider, makes $30,000 a year. Therefore, according to the OPM, she is above the poverty line. However, her family lives in the city, where real estate taxes and food are more expensive. In addition, she has to take the bus to work, which costs her over $1,000 per year. Luckily, the grandfather is healthy and able to look after the youngest child, who is too young to attend school. At the end of the day, the family struggles to make ends meet, without receiving any government benefits that would have been available to them had the mother received $2,000 less on her paycheck.
So, obviously, there are a few holes in the OPM threshold that won't work for the purposes of measuring poverty today. We argue that the Human Development Index best serves people in the United States because it gives a more accurate lens when discussing the capabilities and functionings of a person. Well, what are capabilities? Martin Nussbaum defined combined capabilities as what we have the skills and context of choice to do and be. There are such capabilities that are basic, such as literacy, good health, and a quote, decent way of living. These are generally widely valued by members in any given society. Human development is dependent on one's capabilities. If one doesn't have the tools to develop them, then they may face the risk of not developing how a dignified human being should in the world. Well, how does this tie into the Human Development Index? The Human Development Index has 3 major factors which they define as such. 1. A long and healthy life. This includes the capability to live a long, healthy life if current mortality rates continue throughout his or her life. 2. Access to knowledge. This is critical because one has to have some level of education so that they may have the freedom to decide what to do and who they want to be. And 3. A decent standard of living. Income is necessary to achieve basic needs such as food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. Income also gives you the freedom to do and be many things, while on the contrary, its absence limits opportunities to grow and develop freely as a human being. Poverty doesn't equal low well-being, but rather it equals a lack of means to pursue well-being. For example, let's use a family. Grandpa gets an illness that hospitalizes him for weeks at a time. Mom isn't making enough money to really cover Grandpa's hospital bills, but she's doing the best she can with what she has. The children have to go to school, and suddenly one of them is diagnosed with diabetes, changing a lot about the household, mainly the diet plan, especially since Mom was so reliant on the dollar menus at fast foods around the area. She doesn't have the means to cover both Grandpa's hospital bills, nor, Sarah's insulin and food, and to keep up with the rest of the kids, one of which is in daycare because Grandpa can't watch her anymore. And at the end of the day, according to the OPM, Mom is doing just fine. Compared to another family with extremely healthy members in the same amount of income, monetarily wise, everyone seems to be okay, but income measurement hasn't really delved into the depths of the family situation. Although it may not be the easiest way to measure poverty, the system should include capabilities in their final assessment. It is not only about how the family looks on the outside, but rather how the individual needs and capabilities of these members are met in society.
Let's talk about how we can put some of these ideas into practice. What is descriptive poverty identification? Poverty identification is how we answer the question, how do we characterize poverty? Ameria then outlines two types of poverty identification, descriptive and policy forms. While policy form focuses on deciding the focus of public policy and then deriving the definition of poverty from that, descriptive form focuses on identifying poverty, determining what should be done about it, what could be done about it, and forming policy around that. We believe that using descriptive form is a better way to identify poverty because it allows us to first diagnose the problem, free from bias of availability of resources. Sun points out that if we allow availability of resources to bias our definition of poverty, then lack of economic means to fix the problem will lead to the conclusion that there is no problem, and this is simply not true. Having decided that descriptive poverty identification is a good method, how can we see that the capabilities approach lends itself to descriptive poverty identification? When we define poverty by lack of capabilities to achieve a socially acceptable level of functioning, we say that people lack skills necessary to do or become what they desire, or that they lack context for choice in what they can do or become. Using this approach allows us to isolate the main causes of poverty and focus on ending poverty in the long term, rather than short-term fixes such as welfare spending. It's important to note that while we have pointed out some key flaws in current short-term plans, such as the OPM, and shown why we believe that the capabilities approach is the most comprehensive, we also understand that there is some need for short-term poverty relief. We are not advocating for the discontinuation of such aid, but merely pointing out that the formula for distribution is flawed and should be revised based on the shortcomings we've pointed out. So how does this prevent fallacy of measurement? Nussbaum defines fallacy of measurement as the phenomenon where people notice that a certain thing is easy to measure, and so they become convinced that this thing is the most pertinent or central thing. The capabilities approach eliminates fallacy of measurement because there is no one central numerical way to measure a person's capabilities. We must use discursive measurement in addition to quantitative measurement to evaluate a person's individual situation. Even the Human Development Index, which is one widespread way of measuring capabilities, uses a threefold approach to identify different causes of capability deficiency, such as gender or race. Many people take issues with the capabilities approach because they say the descriptive form of poverty identification and the capabilities approach lends itself to utopianism, or the idealization of what our society should be like. However, the capabilities approach should be used to define certain minimally acceptable levels for a person to not be impoverished. What's considered as impoverished in one country may not be in another. Therefore, what is utopian to some is a social norm to another. Therefore, each society should determine its own levels of what is minimally acceptable depending on their culture and poverty within that country. So let's go back to our family. Using the descriptive approach, we can see that mom's lack of capability to produce enough income for all the non-discretionary costs the family needs, such as transportation, grandpa's health care, a diabetic diet for her child, and daycare, can have several causes. She might have low education because she grew up in a poor neighborhood, or she might be unable to find work with better pay because of her gender, skin color, sexual orientation, or social status. So what should we do? We should create programs that allow mom to go back to school, or policy that works to end discrimination within our communities. From there, a society can explore what they have the means to do and formulate a long-term plan for ending poverty, in addition to improved distribution on short-term aid based on the shortcomings we pointed out.
In conclusion, we feel that it is vital to not just explore the easiest route when measuring poverty, rather the most adequate approach. The ideal approach would factor everything that affects a family situation alongside numerical measurements in order to produce a more accurate representation of what one needs to satisfy their human development. We feel that the Human Development Index examines all of these factors, making it the most fitting way when measuring poverty in the United States.